Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones. Tonight we have Debra Medina. She's running for governor in the Republican primary. Debra is the chair of the Wharton County Republican Party, owns her own business in the medical services industry, is a mother, a former rancher, and was born in Beeville, Texas. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
All right, Debra, let's cut quickly to the chase. We're in a highly charged governor's primary. You're running against Rick Perry, who's been in office for 10 years and wants 4 more. You're running against Kay Bailey Hutchison, who's been active in Texas politics and elective office for a long time, and you joined this race. So first thing I want to know is, why did you run?
Didn't see either Kay or Rick representing Republicans. We've talked about what conservative policies are, and both of them seem, in my mind, and I think in the mind of many Texans, to be bigger government. Every time we face a crisis or a problem in our state, they see government solutions. I see people solutions. I think that's where most conservatives are, and I didn't see anybody else stepping in to represent we Texans, and so I entered the race back in February.
So is it fair to say you reject Governor Perry's assertions throughout this campaign that he is the conservative candidate for governor?
Oh, I absolutely reject him. I also reject his assertion that he's the only one with a rural background.
Well, that's clearly true. What city do you now live in?
I live in Wharton.
Okay.
Which is my hometown.
Which is
my home county
Grew
of my
up in
birth.
Beeville, milked a cow every day of my life. I think there's even a video out there with me carrying a 50-pound bag of feed on my shoulder, feeding cattle at my house. And
I haven't seen Rick Perry's video with that, but I'm sure he did it at some point. Okay. Well, Perry has stated that he needs to be reelected because he's the one who stands up for, I guess, unborn children, and he stands up for the taxpayers, and he stands up against massive property tax increases. He's cut spending when it needs to cut spending. Are these allegations or statements he's made, are they true?
They're not true, and I think the biggest surprise for me policy-wise in the most recent debate was the question about the death panels in Texas. I think the governor's done a good job of convincing people that he's pro-life, and I have to say, really, what is it that you've done to put some bite in that bark of yours to really protect this innocent life? And to have him admit on that stage that he wasn't aware of the death panels in Texas, the changes to the advanced directive law that occurred under his watch as lieutenant governor of this state, but especially in light of the fact that in Austin recently there was a baby case. This child was terminally ill. The family wanted to take him home to have him die with his parents. This was a young baby, and there were some ethic panel problems there. It made national news right under the governor's nose, and he was unaware that we had such a problem existing in Texas.
Where did you begin your political life? I mean, I know you're a volunteer now as Wharton County's chair.
Chair.
Have you ever
Right.
run for anything else other than party chair?
Party chair is the only elected office I've held, and I've been in that office 3 terms.
And so you've never really represented a broad-based group of people. You've represented Republicans, correct?
Represented, I think,
as a
taxpayers and as an elected
you didn't invite
office,
you didn't invite Democrats to your meetings, is what I'm saying, when you were Republican chair.
Au contraire, help me with that
That's
French
it.
word.
That's it.
Getting close. All of the Wharton County Republican Party meetings are open to the public. My work as a political grassroots activist was to really educate people. Everything I've done has been trying to bring people in. Unlike many of the Republican Party Lincoln Reagan dinners and other fundraising efforts where there are real high dollars, in Wharton County we kept those fees at about $10 a head. I wanted people to come in and learn about public policy and political ideology, and have invited people who I think have a good understanding of what government ought to look like to be the keynote speakers, to try to motivate people to be involved. And I don't really care what side of the political spectrum you're on. I like a good, healthy debate and bring them in.
Well, when did you get the bug for politics?
Early 90s.
And what caused you to get that?
The deacons in my church voted to remove the pro-life plank of the Republican Party platform. And it set the bit for me. I thought, oh my gosh, if that can happen in my own community, by men in my church, then clearly there are other things that can be destroyed or removed from our public square that I think ought to be preserved and protected. And so I better be paying attention, and I've been paying close attention since the early 90s.
So we have a leader in the Republican Party named Sarah Palin. She's, people say, the teabag sort of representative. She's coming. Tea Party, sorry.
She's coming
to town. She's coming to Texas for Rick Perry.
We hear.
Well, that's what I hear too. And we know that George W. Bush, Dick Cheney are all for Kay Bailey Hutchison. You were active in the Ron Paul campaign. He ran for president. He sent a letter out saying everybody ought to get to know you. So basically, he's not for you. So who is?
Oh, he is for us. He's been very generous in his comments. He's given a nice contribution to the campaign. We're getting some support there, and I'm not surprised by that. I know that it's difficult for people that are in office to get involved in contested primaries, and so I recognize and respect the service that he's brought to the Republican Party, and I'm happy to have his support.
Well, it's clear you have the most momentum of the three candidates because you basically started with nothing. You had zero name ID in the state. The latest Rasmussen poll has you only down 6 points to Bill White statewide, which I think is pretty impressive, David, given that she's come essentially out of nowhere. And I guess it's not going to spend tens of millions of dollars at this round of the election, though I guess if you're the nominee, the money will be there. But my question, I guess, is more important. What have you experienced since when most people acknowledge you won the debate, or the first debate for the governor's race? What has that done to your campaign?
Tremendous amount of excitement. We've seen a 12-fold increase in our web traffic. I was the number 3 searched Google term that day. We raised $230,000 in 10 months, from February, or I guess 11, from February until December. In the last week, we've raised over $100,000. And that's not one person writing a check or even 10 people. It is $25 and $50. That's a lot of contributions. The tone at the events that I'm speaking at, I've got a pretty aggressive speaking schedule. The tone of those events has changed. People are really energized. They've been hopeful all along. But I think a little bit, this is such a struggle and such a battle, and now they see that victory is within their grasp, and they are excited.
Well, only Gary Pollan is saying that you have a chance of being the nominee. The people who write about these things say you might get 10, 12%, and if so, you're going to throw it into a runoff. Who have you decided that you will back as between Kay Bailey Hutchison and Rick Perry?
I'll back the most conservative candidate for governor, and I don't know that either one of them are conservative. I'm going to win this race.
But you will pick, will you not? If you're third, you will pick somebody.
I will pick a conservative.
You ran, it seems...
It means, David, she could pick Bill White. He wants to run as a conservative, doesn't he?
He's trying, I'm sure.
That's certainly not as a liberal Democrat.
I watched the debate, and you did do very well. It occurred to me that you mentioned a couple of arguments that I'd like to ask you about. One of them had something to do with the states having their business interfered with by the federal government, which is sort of you probably even mentioned the 10th Amendment, I'm sure. And then the other one was gun ownership, which you talk a bit about, which is the Second Amendment. You are not a lawyer, are you not?
I'm not.
And at last I checked, you're not a constitutional scholar, correct? Would you say you are?
I don't know, that word scholar's a big word. Am I somebody who reads and studies the Constitution? Have I read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers? Yeah. Do I rely a lot on the ideas that our fathers had? Absolutely.
Well, why did you pick the second and the 10th rather than the first, which has to do with, establishment of religion?
Oh, I don't know. I think Gary and I did a good job in that last lawsuit on the first, the right to freedom of assembly, the right for people to come together and have a deliberative assembly, understanding that wisdom comes from the minds of men. It's not one of us that has the best answers. It's that coming together collectively and having a deliberative assembly. The founders understood that was where the best wisdom, the wisest choices would come from, and they put freedom of assembly in the first. So there's been a battle on the first.
Okay, on the gun ownership thing or the gun rights thing, do you think felons, 14-year-olds, and mental incompetents ought to be able to purchase and carry handguns?
I think Texas has decided that, and I've not challenged the laws that Texas has with regard to who can and who cannot own a weapon. But if you are legally able to own a weapon, then I don't believe we should be setting 50 hurdles in front of you that you have to cross before you can carry that weapon with you. That's where I have the real, I think, argument that I'm a female and I'm traveling, but I can't bring my gun in here to protect myself unless I first go through a CHL class. I shouldn't have to do that.
Well, Debra, Governor Perry has said he's the most pro-gun governor in the history of Texas, and he's expanded gun rights. Do you dispute that?
Maybe negligibly. I don't know how much he's expanded them or not. But yeah, when we have a tragic shooting at Fort Hood, Governor Perry thinks the answer is put $1.5 million into psychological counseling so someone won't be deranged and do something like that again. No amount of military presence and no amount of police protection is going to protect us. They can't get there fast enough. If we are going to protect life, liberty, and property, we all have to first take the individual responsibility to do that. Some will opt to learn martial arts for their self-protection. Others may carry a different sort of weapon. But for some of us, the handgun or a firearm would be the weapon of choice. And if we are law-abiding citizens, that is our constitutional right, and we ought to be able to carry freely here in Texas. We're not able to do that.
Well, of course, the Supreme Court says we can regulate handguns. I mean, so unless you're saying that you should be believed as the observer and objective analyst of the Second Amendment, we'd have to listen to the Supreme Court, wouldn't we?
Shall not be infringed is pretty clear. And we've got a recent case, even Prince Mack, before the U.S. Supreme Court, saying that the federal government cannot dictate to the states and to state officers what they have to do in violation of the Constitution. Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed.
Let's talk about bailout money. One of the disputes going on in this race is did Texas get bailed out by the federal government?
Yes.
Did Kay vote for the bailout?
Yes.
Did Rick Perry take $15 billion
Yes.
For the state of Texas for bailout money, but he still attacks or didn't attack you? First of all, should Texas have taken $15 billion from the federal government, from Barack Obama, essentially, to balance our budget?
The state of Texas has a history of growing our dependence on the federal government. All states do that. We've seen it coming for years. I don't think that that's anything new. It's a third of our state budget. Where I see the problem is the governor trying to be the pot calling the kettle black. He has increased Texas' dependence on the federal government without trying to reduce the strings that are attached. I think we've seen a number of Republican presidents in the past who have recognized the detriment of that trend and tried to reverse it by moving the states from accepting categorical grants that have a lot of strings attached to them to saying, let's get back to block grants. That's our money. So to say for $15 billion and a significant cut in the services that the state provides, we don't want any of that money, is probably so painful people aren't ready to go there. But can we begin to work very closely and diligently with our congressional delegation to say, if you've decided that X number of dollars are coming to Texas for education, then Texas will decide how to spend those education dollars. We're not going to let the federal government set all of these criteria. We've got to be pushing hard in that way. The governor hasn't offered any leadership in that regard.
You're with the governor then in his refusing to apply to the race to the top monies that would have given the state of Texas anywhere from $300 to $700 million to improve K through 12 performance. He's right on that.
I'd have fought the federal government on the dictates. I think I also will fight to keep money in Texas. And I don't know that any of us sitting outside of the governor's office have all of the information that we need to really look at the best strategy for waging that battle. I think he's grandstanding. He likes to take credit for rejecting $500 million of unemployment funds while he was taking billions because it's a political grandstanding. It's not strategic leadership for the state of Texas. That's where we're lacking, and that's the kind of direction I want to bring to Texas.
In fact, we turned down the $500 million, and aren't our unemployment taxes going to triple this year?
Right.
which is a tax on business.
And so
Not a good thing.
we see our leader, I think, implementing policies because he thinks it gets him a few points in the polls, and the reality is the people of Texas continue to suffer.
All right, if you are elected governor, you come in, 2 months later you're dealing with a budget for the next biennium. Estimates now is we're going to be down $12 to $14 billion, maybe $16 billion. The rainy day fund is $9 billion. That means if we
the rainy
swallow
day fund is $6 or $7 billion.
All right, if we swallow all the rainy day fund, we're still in trouble.
Right.
How does Texas balance its budget?
I think that you recognize, as I do, that private property ownership is an essential element of freedom, and you restore property ownership, you get rid of property tax, recognizing that, I keep saying, that's a freedom issue first. People have to own property to be free men and women. We say the American dream is to own a home, and we don't. But the fiscal benefits of freedom are tremendous. We've got a study out from the Texas Public Policy Foundation that shows $3 billion increase in the first year alone in net personal income in Texas. We add 150,000 jobs to the Texas economy. That will help with some of those revenue needs. And then we streamline and look at efficiencies and effectiveness in spending. We've got some serious work ahead. I think Texas is ready to do that if we understand the condition that we're in. We've got the governor running around the state talking about how healthy we are economically, and in fact, we've lost 14,000 jobs in the private sector, and we've tripled our debt. We're $31 billion in debt as a state. If we don't take any additional debt, we don't get out of debt until 2047 as a state.
He actually has written a letter to all state agencies just in the last 48 hours saying that they should prepare a 5% across-the-board cut with certain programs excluded, such as Medicaid and the like. So why would you say he's not getting ready for...
I'm glad he's gotten there, finally, but most of us have been pensioned for over a year. Most of us have been cutting back for over a year. If you look at the most recent jobs numbers, you'll see that the only sector adding employees and significant numbers of employees is the government sector. Even month over month, from October of 2009 to November of 2009, we're adding people in the government sector. That is not cutting spending. That's not cutting expenses.
So the private economy in Texas
is contracting.
It's contracting, and some would say that means it's failing. You know, our private capital, economy is failing, is it not?
Are we stumbling under a weight of an oppressive government? Yeah, we are. Do we still
not need to provide food stamps to people who have no income? Do we still not need to provide Medicaid for people who are only making $10,000?
We never needed to do that. That is not the government's role. When people hurt, the community and the church, neighbors take care of neighbors. That's the healthy society. That's a healthy, prosperous, and free society. And where we have gone awry as a state is to say, no, it's the state's job. The very thing that people are fearful of with the nationalization of health care has already happened here in Texas. There's not an audience I speak to where I say, is there anybody in this room who thinks health care is the number one job of the state of Texas? Nobody raises their hand. And yet, that's where we spend the most of our state resources is on delivering health care. That's not the job of the state government.
So we're in a race to the bottom, are we not? I mean, our graduation rates say that. Our dropout rates say that. Our teacher pay says that. Uninsured kids say that. Prisons. So why are we in the race to the bottom? Let me ask you this. My question is, why are we at a race to the bottom in so many things in the leadership of Rick Perry, who was elected twice by Republicans and who has presided over a Republican legislature? Why are we at a race to the bottom?
Well, I don't know that I'd characterize it as a race to the bottom. Are we headed in the wrong direction? Absolutely. That's why I'm in this race. I don't see Rick Perry. I would argue with you for the last term and a half. He hasn't been leading Texans in the direction he should be. And so you've got this businesswoman with limited name ID stepping into the ring to fight a fight that I don't see anybody else joining in. Certainly Texans are hopeful that somebody will have the courage to get in there and try to lead the state in a different direction. For such a time as this, I'm fighting that fight and very encouraged to have the kind of momentum that we have going. We've got, 40 some odd days left. We're going to win this race.
Property taxes, you mentioned that. That's one of your areas in your tax reform plan is basically to abolish property taxes. David would argue that if you get rid of property taxes, you blow a hole in the state budget, in the school district's budget, that is only fillable by what David's favorite tax, a state income tax. Your response?
Absolutely not. We've got a state income tax. I think we need to get rid of it. It's called the business margins tax. All tax is a burden on the economy. All tax is a burden on people. All taxes are regressive. The sales tax is the least burdensome, the least regressive of all the taxes, especially the way we have structured it here in Texas to not apply the tax to food and medicine. We, to the degree possible, cut the regressivity of that tax. That study that I referred to earlier shows that if we would use a sales tax to fund the essential elements of government in the state of Texas, we would see those tremendous economic benefits.
What would that tax rate be if we had a sales tax rate as high enough to take over for what the property tax?
The study shows 3 different models, and I think that really is a legislative decision. It's a debate that we ought to be having. What are we going to tax? What does that tax look like? But the rates in the study go anywhere from 6.1, which would actually be lowering the current state tax of 6 1/4, lowering it down to 6.1, to as high as 15. And so somewhere in that spectrum, that is no more property tax, never pay another dime of property tax, make property tax in Texas an illegal method of raising revenue.
You very courageously said in October, I read a press release that you wrote about Rick Perry and his failures in the Willingham death penalty case, where the committee that was going to study the arson science that had led to this gentleman's conviction
Saturday Night Massacre
and execution. And you basically said, in language that I can quote here, that he had showed a willful, habitual pattern of ignoring evidence while sitting as judge, jury, and executioner. I take it that when you say you're pro-life, that means you're against the death penalty.
No, I've been a proponent of the death penalty. I think government's premier job, is to ensure justice, and protecting innocent life from conception to natural death is the role of government. But once convicted and found guilty, death penalty should serve as a deterrent to further heinous crimes. I've said that there are some crimes so heinous that death penalty is the only just punishment. So I absolutely am a supporter of the death penalty, but we cannot ignore facts and truth, and we have to have the courage to face those. As a registered nurse, I've sat on committees. Every hospital reviews every death that occurs in the hospital, not to punish the people that worked that case, but to make sure that we understood the facts, that there wasn't anything humanly possible that could have been done to prevent that death or treat that case better. And I think that's what the Forensic Science Commission has been charged with doing, looking at forensic evidence and how it's used in criminal trials in Texas to make sure that the evidence is accurate and fair.
Should we do that on every death penalty case? Or are you willing to accept the execution of innocent people in order to preserve the penalty? Because you say that Rick Perry presided over the execution, knowingly, willingly allowed the execution of a man who was likely innocent. How many others do you think? How many others did he kill? How many others has he killed?
Rick Perry buried the study.
All right, well,
I haven't spoken to, because I don't have the evidence, to Mr. Willingham's guilt or innocence. I'm critical of the burying of the study that needed to be done.
Would you call it burying, or would you call it cover-up?
Either.
Okay, and when you do that, what does that do to the death penalty? David, obviously, and there's lots of people in Texas that feel like David does, that we should not have a death penalty because we're executing guilty people, but we're maybe also executing innocent people. Do you think the cover-up that Rick Perry did in this case advances the cause of those who believe in the death penalty or not?
I don't know whether it advances. I've gone far enough, Gary, to say I think we should put a moratorium on executions until we study the criminal justice system in Texas. I think that it seems to me every rock that we turn over in every agency of state government, there's a den of vipers. There's this dirty underbelly. We saw it in the Texas Youth Commission, where there was 18 months of documented sexual abuse of children held in the Texas Youth Commission system. They knew it. And the governor didn't exert the leadership to fix that until the media broke the story. We've got this abuse of mentally challenged individuals going on in Corpus Christi, Texas for over a year. Leadership had to know about that, and yet they didn't do anything about it. We've got TxDOT choking us for putting a stranglehold on the Texas taxpayer for more and more money, all the while sitting on $1 billion pile of cash that they didn't want to tell us about because their initiative was to give our land to a company from Spain for the next 100 years. So the agenda of leadership in Texas hasn't been service and it hasn't been excellence. And I'd say with all of that evidence, you know that you have to have similar problems in the Texas Department of Health and in the Texas criminal justice system. We've got to raise the bar. We deserve frugality, excellence, transparency, and accountability in every area of state government. And until we've done that, I'd be willing to say we ought to put a moratorium on
executions. And you have made some news today and tonight.
And made the case, David,
thanks for being with us.
Time for change. Thanks.
Appreciate it. You can view tonight's show along with a follow-up discussion by visiting us at Red, White, and Blue. HoustonPBS.org is the website, so check that out. And until next time, get informed and get active.